rain didn't fall that night. It attacked the city like it had something to prove. Sheets of water slammed against cracked sidewalks. Thunder cracked like breaking bones in the sky. And the streets emptied into silence, as if the whole world had decided to hide, except for one man walking through it, and one woman who couldn't stop crying. Armin Qureshi had already lived through storms far worse than this. If you believe that even the smallest act of kindness can change someone's life forever, take a second right now to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Heartfelt Stories. Because tonight's story might just remind you why humanity still matters. Armin didn't usually take the long way home. He didn't have the luxury of time. His life had become a strict equation. Work, daycare pickup, groceries, bills, repeat. Every minute mattered when you were raising a 6-year-old alone in a world that never slowed down. But that evening, something had gone wrong at the office. A supplier had backed out. A client had delayed payment. And his already fragile startup teetered on the edge of collapse. So instead of heading straight home, he walked aimlessly, letting the rain soak through his worn jacket as if it could wash away the weight pressing on his chest. His company, a small logistics startup he had built from scratch after losing everything, was barely surviving. There were days he skipped meals so his daughter Meher wouldn't have to. Nights when he stared at spreadsheets until his eyes blurred, trying to find a way to keep the doors open just one more week. And yet, despite the exhaustion, he kept going. Because quitting wasn't an option when someone depended on you for everything. That was when he saw her. She was standing under a flickering streetlight, completely drenched, her arms wrapped tightly around herself like she was trying to hold her soul together. Her shoulders trembled, not just from the cold, but from something deeper, something broken. Her tears blended with the rain, but the sound of her sobbing cut through the storm like a quiet scream. Armin slowed down. He had every reason to keep walking. He had responsibilities, worries, a daughter waiting at home. But something about the way she stood there, alone, shattered, invisible to the world, pulled him back. He approached cautiously, not wanting to startle her. His voice was gentle, almost lost beneath the rain, but steady enough to reach her. He asked if she was okay, though it was obvious she wasn't. She didn't answer at first. Her eyes were distant, like she had been somewhere far away and hadn't yet returned. Then, slowly, she shook her head. Not dramatically, not loudly, just a quiet admission of defeat. Armin didn't ask questions. He didn't need to know her story to recognize pain. He had lived it. He took off his jacket, even though it was already soaked, and draped it over her shoulders. It wasn't much, but it was something. Then he guided her gently toward the small tea stall across the street, one of the few places still open despite the storm. Inside, the dim light and warmth felt like a different world. He ordered 2 cups of chai, placing one in front of her, without a word. She wrapped her trembling hands around it, as if holding on to something real for the first time that night. Minutes passed in silence, and in that silence, something shifted. She began to breathe more evenly. The shaking eased. Her tears slowed. She looked at him. Not fully, not directly, but enough to acknowledge his presence. There was no grand speech, no dramatic confession. Just a quiet moment between 2 strangers who had both known what it felt like to lose control of their lives. When she finally spoke, her voice was fragile, like glass on the verge of shattering again. She said she had nowhere to go. Armin hesitated. Inviting a stranger into his life wasn't something he could afford, not emotionally, not practically. But leaving her out there in the storm felt worse. So he did what he always did when life forced him to choose between logic and compassion. He chose compassion. He arranged a ride for her to a safe guest house nearby, paid for a night stay with money he couldn't spare, and wrote his number on a small piece of paper in case she needed help. He didn't expect anything in return. He didn't even expect to see her again. Because that's what kindness is supposed to be. Selfless, quiet, without expectation. The next morning, reality came crashing back. Armin woke up to the sound of his alarm and the soft breathing of Meher beside him. He lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling, already feeling the weight of the day pressing down on him. There were bills due, employees waiting for salaries, clients demanding updates, and a bank account that was dangerously close to empty. He got up, prepared breakfast, helped Meher get ready for school, and forced a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. She noticed, of course. She always did, but she didn't ask questions. She simply hugged him a little tighter before leaving, as if she understood more than a child should. At the office, things were worse than he had feared. One of his key clients had pulled out. Another payment was delayed indefinitely. His accountant sat across from him, speaking in careful, measured tones, explaining what Armin already knew but didn't want to hear. They had maybe a week. Maybe. Armin sat there in silence after the meeting, staring at the walls he had painted himself, the desks he had assembled, the dream he had built piece by piece. It wasn't just a business. It was proof that he could rebuild after losing everything. Proof that he could give his daughter a future. And now it was slipping away. By afternoon, he had accepted what he didn't want to accept. He would have to sell, even if it meant losing control, losing his vision, losing the thing that had kept him going through the darkest nights. The idea felt like failure. But sometimes survival demands sacrifices that pride cannot afford. That was when his phone rang. An unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. The voice on the other end was calm, composed, familiar in a way he couldn't immediately place. She introduced herself, and for a moment, time seemed to pause. It was her, the woman from the rain. She asked if she could meet him, said it was important. Armin agreed, though he didn't know why. They met later that evening, not in a crowded cafe or a noisy office, but in a quiet, elegant conference room that felt worlds away from the life he knew. And when she walked in, he barely recognized her. Gone was the broken woman from the storm. In her place stood someone composed, confident, almost untouchable. Her presence filled the room in a way that demanded attention without asking for it. Her name was Alira Voss, and everything about her had changed, except her eyes. There was still something in them, something that remembered what happened next and feel real. She spoke calmly, professionally, explaining that she had been going through one of the worst nights of her life when he found her, that his kindness had meant more than he could possibly understand. And then she said something that made his world tilt. She had spent the entire day researching him, his company, his struggles, his potential, and now she wanted to buy it, not to shut it down, not to strip it for parts, but to save it, to invest, to rebuild it into something bigger than he had ever imagined. Armin didn't know what to say, because life doesn't usually work like that. Kindness doesn't usually come back like this. But sometimes, just sometimes, it does. The negotiations were quick, almost surreal. Alira didn't bargain him down. She didn't exploit his desperation. Instead, she offered terms that were fair, generous, even. She insisted he remain as CEO, that he continue leading the company he had built, because she didn't just believe in the business. She believed in him. And for the first time in a long time, Armin felt something he had almost forgotten. Hope. Days turned into weeks, and everything began to change. The company stabilized. New clients came in. Operations expanded. The weight that had once crushed Armin's chest slowly began to lift. At home, Meher noticed the difference immediately. Her father laughed more, slept better, smiled without forcing it. And yet, amidst all the change, one question lingered in Armin's mind. Why? Why had she done it? One evening, he finally asked. Alira didn't answer right away. She looked out the window, her expression distant, as if she were seeing something far beyond the city lights. Then she told him, about loss, about betrayal, about a life that had once been full of certainty and had suddenly fallen apart. She had stood in that rain not because of a single bad day, but because everything she had built had collapsed. And in that moment, when she felt invisible to the world, he had seen her, not her status, not her wealth, not her potential, just her. And sometimes that's all a person needs to be saved. As the story comes to close, there's something important to remember. Kindness is never wasted. You may not see its impact immediately. You may never see it at all, but it travels, it grows, it comes back in ways you could never predict. If this story touched your heart even a little, take a moment to comment, and share it with someone who needs to hear it, because stories like this deserve to be felt, not just heard. And before you go,